What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch back here with another fantasy football stardom and situm. This time for week number 8 of the 2019 NFL season. Before I get into my start and sits for the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end positions, my best bets this week to help you win in your fantasy football league, make sure that you do Gronk spike the like button, subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more NFL and fantasy football videos just like this, and comment below your fantasy football start and sit questions. What questions do you have for me? Put those in the comment section below so I can help you win. Alright, let's start off with the quarterback position. The quarterback starts Jared Goff versus the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals have allowed the 7th most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. I expect this game to be a blowout. I expect Jared Goff to build on his good fantasy performance from last week into this week, and versus a team that's led by Zach Taylor, I'm sure that his mentor, Sean McVay, wants to show him up. Josh Allen versus the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles have allowed a 100.6 passer rating to quarterbacks this season and the 5th most yards to the position. So Josh Allen is in a good spot here versus the Eagles. He continues his nice little schedule of defenses. So if you have Josh Allen, you're going to keep starting him for the next few weeks. Matt Stafford versus the New York Giants. Without Kerryon Johnson, I believe Matt Stafford's actually going to have a really good game here as a passer, as a fantasy quarterback. Stafford has been playing very, very well this season with or without Kerryon. I don't think it matters because his wide receivers are playing very well. Whether that's Golladay, Marvin Jones, who went off last week, Danny Amendola, Hawkinson in the mix at tight end. This is a very weak pass defense of the Giants. I expect Stafford to capitalize this week. This is actually the worst pass defense that the Lions have played all season long. Derek Carr versus the Houston Texans. The Texans have allowed the 3rd most touchdowns through the air this season and the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. Plus, John Gruden has been a scheming master. So I expect Carr to have a nice game in this one. Tannehill, if you're desperate, with asterisks beside it, versus the Tampa Bay Bucks. The Bucks are a horrible defense. I just don't quite trust Ryan Tannehill quite yet, but if you have a bye week for your starter and you're in need of a guy and you think and you believe in Tannehill, then I give you my recommendation. And this is why. The Bucks have allowed the most yards through the air this season. They are the only team in the league that are allowing more than 300 yards per game. So Tannehill, if he hits, he might hit big. Quarterback sits. Baker Mayfield versus the Patriots. Insert quarterback versus Patriots here. The Patriots defense are allowing the least amount of points per game since 1934. They are averaging the most takeaways, and they have the best 3rd down percentage of all time. Kyler Murray versus the New Orleans Saints. Over their last 3 games, this is a top 3 pass defense in New Orleans. Kyler did not put up great fantasy points last week. I don't expect it this week versus a very good Saints defense with a very good pass rush. Carson Wentz versus the Bills. Wentz, he's been up and down for fantasy purposes. He's been a little bit underwhelming. The Bills defense, they're not one that I want to start many quarterbacks against. They have they're the 4th best defense versus the pass in the NFL. Only 4 passing touchdowns. They have 6 interceptions on the season. So the Bills, very, very, very good versus the pass. Kyle Allen versus San Francisco. Now, I'm starting Josh Allen. Kyle Allen's a different story, though, because the 49ers, they are 1st in passing yards allowed this season, even above the Patriots so far this year. I don't expect that to really change versus Kyle Allen, just because I don't expect the Panthers to really put him in many difficult situations. I think most of the passes that will be done by the Panthers will be in order to get the ball out quick versus this great pass rush of the 49ers. So I don't see this leading to a great fantasy day, even if the Panthers do pull off the upset. Phillip Rivers versus the Bears. I'm worried about the Chargers offensive line versus Khalil Mack and company, so I would not start Phillip Rivers this week. The Bears also rank 5th versus quarterbacks this year. My running back starts. Let's start off with Sony Michel. I believe it's closing on Sony, the experience of Sony season. The Browns have allowed the 3rd most yards on the ground this season and over 200 yards in their last 3 games. Latavius Murray versus Arizona. If Kamara doesn't play, Murray is again a great start. He was awesome versus Chicago, and that's a much more difficult defense than Arizona. Arizona is bottom 7 versus the run, so expect Murray, if he does start, to have a very nice game. Coleman versus Carolina. Now, the Panthers have a good defense. I believe in it a ton, but that's more to do with their pass defense than their run defense. Pass defense is in the top 10. Run defense is in actually the bottom 10. They rank 23rd versus the run. The 49ers, they're a run-first team anyways, so they're going to look to exploit that. I like Tevin Coleman this week. Henderson versus the Bengals. This game is in London, meaning that that's going to seize up Todd Gurley. He might be, a little bit more sore because he's flying over that ocean. And this is just a tidbit from Warren Sharp, but he actually believes that Henderson could be in for a big day. He could be in for a lot of touches. And I agree with him, because not only is that the case with Gurley, where he might actually be physically unable to carry the load, but Henderson is the primary backup with Malcolm Brown out. And if this game is a blowout, they're not going to risk Gurley on the field. So Henderson could have a really nice fantasy day. Williams, that is Jamal Williams versus Kansas City. Williams is playing very well lately. If you've watched him at any moment in time over the last couple of weeks, he's been very explosive, looks good. The Chiefs are allowing the 3rd most rushing yards in the league. I expect Green Bay to expose that with their 2 backs this week. They've also been running the ball as a team very well. Running back sits Singletary and Gore versus Philadelphia, but mostly Devin here, because the Eagles, they're very good stopping the run. They're one of the best in the league, but Singletary does not get many touches. So that being said, if you're going to start one or the other, I'd start Gore for the chance of a touchdown, but I probably wouldn't start either in a PPR league if I really had better choices. Henry versus Tampa Bay. The Bucs are 1st in yards allowed this year. They are actually an incredible run defense. That's better than San Fran. That's better than New England. They're the best. So I would not start Derrick Henry if you have better options. You can still start him probably as a flex if you'd like, if you don't have any better options because of the bye week situation. But if you do have flexibility at this position, sit Derrick Henry. Mixon versus the Rams. The Raiders are 5th in yards per game allowed to the running back position on the ground in general. And in the last 3 games, they've only allowed 61 rushing yards per game. Melvin Gordon versus the Bears. The Bears, they're good versus the run. They've allowed 79 yards per game at home, which is pretty impressive. Anything under 80 is very good. Now, they have struggled as of late, but so has Melvin Gordon. I just don't like what I've seen from the Chargers' offensive line or from their running backs. Austin Eckler is an okay start in PPR leagues, but I don't love Melvin Gordon here at all. My wide receiver starts Juju Smith-Schuster versus the Miami Dolphins. Now, the Dolphins, they suck. Juju, he's been very inconsistent and he's been very hard to trust, but if you're going to trust him ever this season, it has to be versus Miami, because they suck. I mean, this game should be a blowout. And if it's going to be a blowout, Juju is going to be efficient. Kenny Stills versus the Oakland Raiders. No Will Fuller. Oakland has allowed the most deep touchdowns, that's touchdowns over 20 yards in the NFL with 9. Metcalf, DK, Donkey Kong versus Atlanta. Now, Atlanta has allowed the most yards over the last 3 games over 350 yards passing. That means a lot is going to be happening for Russell Wilson. Tyler Lockett can't suck up all those yards. I think Metcalf will. Plus, Pete Carroll, he knows this defensive scheme of Dan Quinn like the back of his hand. He'll have plays, schemes, and I'm sure he'll be talking to Schottenheimer and Wilson, trying to get them geared up for this matchup. John Brown versus Philadelphia. The Eagles have allowed the most fantasy points to this position, and you couple that with John Brown, who's been consistent versus any defense he plays. John Brown is a great start this week. Corey Davis versus Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, they are bad versus the pass. I just discussed how they're the only team to give up 300 yards per game. They play Corey Davis, who just had 11 targets from Ryan Tannehill in their first game together. I expect that to carry over versus Tampa Bay, a team with not very good corners. I think Davis should have another good game here. My wide receiver sits. Let's start off with Jarvis Landry, and I'll also throw out, if you can sit Odell, I would. I mean, he's going to be playing Gilmore and the Patriots defense that is terrorizing quarterbacks and offenses and receivers. If you can sit Odell, I would, but obviously he'll probably have around 5 catches per probably 50 yards. It's not going to be anything special, but you can still start him if you need to. Jarvis Landry, he's going to have one of the best slot corners in the game on him in Jonathan Jones. And you look at it, the Patriots allowed 73 passing yards to the Jets last week. He's not a big play guy the way that Odell is, so maybe Odell gets a big play, but it's doubtful that Jarvis does. Jeffrey versus the Buffalo Bills. The Bills, they have Tre'Davious White, one of the best shutdown corners in the league. He'll probably be shadowing Jeffrey, at least for parts of the game. The Bills are also ranked 4th versus the pass. Boyd versus the Rams. He's been struggling a lot lately. Now he plays Jalen Ramsey. Not a good mix. Panthers wide receivers, that's Samuel and Moore versus the 49ers. The 49ers have allowed the least amount of catches to wide receivers, 51 on the season. The next team is like 10 above them, like 60s area. They are doing a very good job of limiting the amount of completions to opposing quarterbacks. Tight end starts. Let's start off with Jonnu Smith versus Tampa Bay, a guy that not a lot of people recognize his name. He's the backup tight end in Tennessee, now the starter because Delaney Walker is out. He had over 60 yards in the last game on 3 targets, and I believe in this game versus Tampa Bay, the team that allows the most yards, the most fantasy points to this position, I expect for Smith to have a big game here. If you need a bye week fill, Smith could probably be pretty promising. Brate versus Tennessee. No OJ Howard. It's smart to start the guy that's not injured in this scenario, which is Cam Brate. Brate's also been pretty good. He's actually been the better of the 2 tight ends this year overall. He's had 12 fantasy points in 2 of the last 3 games. Everett versus the Bengals. The Bengals, they stink versus the pass. And also Everett's been consistent. 15 fantasy points in 4 of the last 5 games. He should continue that trend. Graham versus Kansas City. The Chiefs, this is more about the Chiefs than Graham, but the Chiefs, they've allowed 7 catches a game, a lot underneath to the tight end position. So early in the game, we should see Jimmy Graham get a lot of targets to move the chains. Noah Fant, the rookie tight end of the Broncos versus Indianapolis. The Colts are 3rd worst versus the tight end position this year. Emmanuel Sanders is gone. I look for them to involve him more in the offense. It makes sense to me. It should make sense to you if you're desperate. Alright guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, Gronk spike the like button, subscribe to the channel for more fantasy. It's been Mitch. Again, comment your questions. Thanks for watching.